we have an excellent Lunch and Learn. We're going to talk about tips and tricks to make your job easier. So these are some technical tips with things like Google and other things on our computer that we can use to sort of learn. We have a couple of different ways for you to watch the show today. You may be watching us on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, I really encourage you to put in some questions. Those questions will be sent over to me, and we can ask our experts to answer your specific questions. Additionally, you could be watching the show on live stream. If you're watching there, again, I encourage you to enter some questions there, and we can put those to our experts as well. After the show today, we'll put the show up on YouTube, and if you saw something that you want to watch again to make sure you understood, or if you want to share the show with a friend, we encourage you to do that. I know sometimes people have commitments over lunch that don't allow them to make the show. So with that in mind, I want to introduce our experts today. First, we have Corey Sanford. Corey is a multimedia specialist here at ATSU. Welcome, Corey.
Thanks, John.
Also, we have Daniel Afzal. Daniel is a support technician here at ATSU. Welcome, Daniel.
Thanks for having me.
And lastly, joining us from his beachfront property in Arizona, we have Ben Lewis. Ben is the support specialist down there in Arizona. Ben, glad to have you.
Glad to be here.
So we're going to get started talking about things we can do on our computer that can make our lives a little bit easier. And so one of the things I just want to kind of throw out there is there's different ways we can organize some of the information that we want to save on our computer. We can save it to our local computer, and so it's actually on the computer. We can save it to our G drive, which is like a sort of an online drive that's available to our entire department. And so you save stuff there. One of the benefits of the G drive is that it's backed up, and so you're less likely to lose stuff. And you also have an H drive, which is, again, another online drive that you can use, but it's just for you. It's not for the entire department. And then lastly, we have our Google Drive. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Google Drives today. And Google Drive is used through Google. It's online. You can share stuff. Has lots of cool features. So we're going to get started talking about what a Google Drive is and some of the different features of it. So Ben, I'm going to turn it over to you and let us know how we can use our Google Drive to better do our jobs.
All right, thank you for bringing it over to me. So first I want to tell you that it's nice and sunny here where I am, and I wish you guys were here with me.
We did too.
It's great out here. So the Google Drive is similar to Dropbox. I know a lot of people use Dropbox here, where it is an online or cloud drive where you'll be able to access your files wherever you go as long as you have internet access. And it's kind of similar to our H&G drive, except for the fact that you don't need any sort of extra or sort of added software like a VPN to access them. The good thing with the Google Drive is that you're able to separate it between two different types of drives if you sign in there. I believe someone might have it up on their computer or can pull it up on their computer.
I got it on mine, yeah. You can
Well, while we do that, I have a question for you, Ben. So you were saying you can access it anywhere. So that means if I know my ATSU username and password, anywhere I have internet, I can go in there and sign into essentially my Google account through ATSU, and that will allow me access to my G Drive. I don't have to have special access to ATSU computers or anything like that. Is that right?
That is absolutely correct. Yep.
Okay.
And it'll be the Google Drive, not the G Drive. Just
okay, the Google Drive. Yeah. Sorry.
But yeah, as long as you have internet access and you remember your username and password, which trust me, I know it's hard sometimes because we have to change every 90 days. But as long as you know that, you should be able to access that Google Drive and access any files that are in those folders there.
All right, cool. All right.
And as I was saying, for if you pull up Corey's computer, you'll be able to see there are two different types of drives there. You'll see on the left, there's My Drive and Team Drives. The My Drive is your personal drive. That's just kind of like your same thing as the H Drive here on campus, where you can put in different file that you only have access to yourself. And then the Team Drives is something that's actually been added recently. It's new, where you can actually add people to your team or from your team to this drive, and then they can share things just like the G Drive.
And so the team drives, that could be like a department, but it could also be like a committee or just a task force kind of of people that you're working together, and you can create that on your own. Is that right, or do you have to ask ITS to create that?
No, you can create that on your own. You should be able to just go in there. I believe you see right where it says members. You should be able to add members for everybody you need.
Okay. All right. And so you can create the drive, and then you add people to it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very
Right
cool.
in here like that.
Now, what is the thing that I always get confused about is like when I share stuff with someone or someone shares stuff with me. So that's not necessarily in My Drive or Team Drives. It's in the Shared with Me section. And can you talk about that a little?
Correct. So with the shared with me section, as you were saying, that's when someone has a file that maybe is just saved in their My Drive, and they share it with you or share it with a couple different people. For the shared with me section, usually when you pick a file of some sort, you can actually right click on it. So we'll say maybe the MP4 file or any file. For if you right click on it, there should be an option to share.
You right click on it.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. So right there,
Yep.
you can see click share, and it will give you a couple different options. So you'll see up there, you can either just copy the link, or you can allow to share. If you click on the little down arrow at the top there.
Right here.
Yep, right there. Yep, you can see you can have different options that you can share with. So anybody with AT Still University, and there's different views there. And then also in the advanced section.
Yeah, here's that. This is probably more of what you were talking about there, right, Ben?
Correct. Yes. Uh huh.
Yeah,
so you can see you can make it public, or anyone with the link, or just people with, for like instances when there's health sciences, and so on and so forth. And then at the bottom you can see can view, can edit, or just can comment on the file.
So I can make it so I can share something with someone, but they can't change it. Because I think
Correct.
the thing about Google Docs I often think about is anybody can change it, but I can set up, if I change it to just view, then they can't change what's on there. They can just look at it.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. All right. Very cool. Very cool. Great. Well, so one of the things I think about my Google Drive is that sometimes I don't want to work on stuff in Google Docs or Sheets, I think it's called, is kind of the Excel version. I want to work on stuff in Word and Excel, but I don't want to download everything. Is there a way that we can do that? Is there some trick or something like that, Corey?
Yeah. So I think like a lot of people, a lot of people are really very comfortable using the Microsoft Office suite, and they just don't really like the Google Sheets or Google Docs, and maybe want to stick with that.
Mm-hmm.
So as a way to use your Office documents in a kind of a seamless way, you can download what's called Drive File Stream for Google Drive, and it basically installs Google locally on your computer. And so if you're in the web Google Drive here, if you click on the gear at the top here, mm-hmm. there's this Get Drive File Stream for Windows.
Okay.
And if you're on a Mac, of course, you could download the Mac version, but you'll want to go down here and download and install Drive File Stream for whatever platform you're using. And what it does is it downloads and it runs on your computer, and then when it's installed, you'll kind of go through the procedure there. There'll be in your system tray below on Windows here, you'll have this drive.
The system tray is that little arrow thing?
The little area down at the bottom of the screen next
okay.
to your clock and all that. This is all the programs that happen to be running on your computer currently.
Okay.
And this will always be kind of running in the background. And you can click on that, and it will show you, you can click the folder option here, and what it does is it makes a folder on your local drive that is basically all of your Google Drive files. So if you look here, now I've got on my local computer all of the files I would have over here on my cloud drive. And so it synchronizes automatically. So how this works with Excel and Word, so you would just, instead of saving, you might save your documents into your documents folder, maybe. Instead of saving them to the documents folder, you would use this Google Drive folder now that's on your computer and save them into this folder. And then basically, you could run your Excel, save the Excel file in there, and it's automatically going to get synchronized with Google Drive on the cloud, so you have a backup copy automatically. And you don't have to really, it's constantly being saved. And so if somebody else had this Drive file stream installed on their computer,
right.
that file, if that was shared with them, that would get downloaded to their computer. They could edit on that. And if they saved it into this Google Drive folder on their local computer, it would get synchronized with the cloud. And so it's just a great way to be able to use Office, or frankly any document, any of your files. Wouldn't matter. It wouldn't have to be
Microsoft
Office.
file.
Yeah, it could be any kind of file.
Any kind of file.
Yeah, so it just basically mirrors your basic drive storage on your local computer. And another thing to point out here is if you'll notice, like on these icons on the screen, they have a little cloud icon by them. These little,
so
that little,
that's
and
how
that's
you
just
know.
telling you that it's not actually downloaded on your computer. You won't, if you click on one of these folders, it's going to show you. Well, of course, I would pick the one that didn't have anything in it. Let's see. There, okay, there's some stuff. So you would actually download, you would double click on this file, and it downloads then the copy of it. So it doesn't take up a bunch of hard drive space on your
It
computer.
doesn't come down until you ask it to come
That's
down,
right,
essentially.
exactly. It doesn't download the file until you actually click on it, and then you can open it. Like here, I have this is a, well, that's a Google sheet, but at any rate, yeah, so you can download it and have it
Okay.
locally saved on your computer.
Well, that sounds really, really nice. What are some of the pros and cons of this, Daniel?
So for me, I would say the pros would include, I would say 2 things. So there's this kind of like an offline toggle that you can turn on and off. So the idea is, say people think of this as something that always needs an internet connection, right? So that's not necessarily actually true with this. So you can say you're about to go to a business trip, or you're going off the grid for a little bit, but you need to work on some
You're on an
documents.
airplane.
Right, exactly, and you have some things that you want to edit from your Google Drive. Now, with it, you can actually right-click on documents that you want or folders that you want, and you can say, store locally or update whenever you actually get internet connection. So you can save those onto it as opposed to just streaming it with an internet connection. And then once you actually get a connection later on, it'll just update it automatically. That being said too, kind of like what Ben was talking about with Dropbox, is that being able to share interdepartmentally is actually quite powerful with this. So, with G Drive and H Drive, that's all within ATSU.
Mm-hmm.
And those rights are kind of delegated and maintained by our network team. But to have your Google Drive, even if you're working with a different school, for instance, or like a totally different research committee or something, being able to have those shareable links, changing the editing rights, viewing rights, and things like that, that's a really powerful tool to be able to work with them. Now, for the cons, I guess, going back to the idea of the G and H Drive, that is going to be a third party, you're working with Google. So you could argue that there's like more security risks.
So not quite as secure, but still pretty secure.
I mean, it's Google, right? So I mean, it's as secure as Google will want it to be, and I mean, that's quite secure. So, but that being said too, with updating documents and things like that, I would say if you want to have like a real-time collaboration, working within the Google Docs and Sheets would probably be a better option because you have that real-time interface. Whereas with these, you have 2 different people working totally independently trying to update the same thing. And so sometimes with that being said, you might update something without someone knowing that they are trying to currently, change something as well, and it can get kind of confusing. So if you want a real-time collaboration,
Actually doing it in the Google Drive might be better.
I would say, well, not necessarily Google Drive, but like the Google Docs and
Google
Sheets, like
Docs and Sheets,
in the web browser, because you can see people typing, you can interact, you can message them. So I would say those would be the pros and cons.
Cool, very good. So one of the things that happened in my Google Drive and also my Gmail is there's so much stuff. Like I can't, I have however many documents and I have however many emails, and so searching and trying to find the thing I want. Like today I was trying to look at the notes for this presentation and I had to it was difficult to find. Any tips on finding stuff in those areas? Like are there search tips, or is Google good for that?
Well, I mean, I think, that's kind of the strong point that Google has. I mean, Google's obviously a search company, so a lot of what they base their idea around is the searching.
Okay.
I think probably I'm guilty of this too, kind of getting the idea of organizing my files by making folders and then having folders beneath folders and then
Right.
folders beneath folders.
If
and
there's fewer than 8 folders, you're not doing it right.
yeah, it gets confusing. And so I think Google's approach is a little more, search for it. So as far as Google, if we can pull up my computer, I can show you on Drive. There's a search bar at the top, which is kind of, simple to see. And there are some, they'll give you some options here. If you just click in there, if you want to search for, just documents or presentations, or it gives you a few of these shortcuts. But if you click this down arrow here, this is where you kind of get into the real power of kind of doing a more complicated search inside of Google Drive. And so you can click that down arrow and pick. Let's say you're looking for a file, it's saying what type. So you can tell it to be, if there's a presentation, this would be, of course, of a Google presentation.
But just it's a doc, you can just hit documents.
Yeah, well, again, this would be documents. I think it would actually look for Google Docs and not an actual Word doc if you had it in there. But
sure.
You could narrow that search down by type. You could narrow it down by who owns the file. You could narrow it down by where in the drive. You know, if you click the little, you know, if you had a certain folder, you know, hey, it's nested down in one of those 1,000 folders I have. You know, you can click just the main one and search throughout that. And then, of course, you can do date modified here, which is nice. That's something if you're like, I was working on that last week, I know. You could go in here. And then you can even do a custom date range so that you could go in here and it gives you a little calendar and you could pick, you know, maybe March 1st to, you know, today or whatever.
And is that the date you modified it or anyone modified it?
Anyone modified it. It would be the date that file was modified.
So if someone told you they were working on something yesterday and you were having trouble finding it, you could really narrow that date down.
Right, exactly. And then you would hit search. Of course, I don't have anything in here for that option, but so then it puts in kind of this more involved search. So it's a great way to locate something that's hard to find and you know, makes it a little bit easier than trying to search through folders.
That's a nice feature. I didn't know what that down arrow did, and I never
they
clicked
hit,
it.
Google's great about that. They'll put a lot of stuff right there in plain sight. It's like, oh, that down arrow.
Yeah,
that's
little
what
down
I use.
arrow.
Yeah.
Now, so I was finding stuff in there can be difficult. Also, I think with Gmail, there's I think a lot of options on Gmail in terms of the settings and stuff. I've gone in and done a few things myself, like I set up, I think, you know, I have a signature and I know how to, you know, put away when I'm on vacation and stuff like that. But there's some tips and tricks within Gmail settings. So,
Yeah.
Daniel, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. If we could pull up my screen. So let's just say that you signed into Gmail, right? Everyone has this main page. And again, there's a very similar search arrow like there was in the Google Drive. It's a little bit different because it's from mail, so you could have different like sizes as well, like how many megabytes and things like that. But the same search that Corey was talking about is applicable here.
Oh, cool.
But to get into the settings, underneath where your profile is right here, there's a gear. And from there, once you click the settings icon, you have to go to yet again another settings tab. But once you get into here, I think this could be a really good place for people to look around a little bit and start finding ways that Gmail can be a little bit more customizable to their specific needs. There's a lot in here, so I'm not going to, you know, be digging through, you know, painstakingly everything that could be useful. There's a lot.
Not that many days.
Right. But there are a few things. So in the general tab for settings, for instance, right here, maximum page size. So one thing is I know a lot of people have trouble, say for instance you're not really going through the whole detailed search engine and saying I'm going to look for this for whatever, you know that you've received it a couple days ago and you're scrolling through the different pages of inbox messages you have. Being able to increase the conversations per page, I think default it's 50. I've changed mine to 100. So being able to just not click, you know, over repeatedly to look for something.
Saves you some time.
Yeah, if you're manually looking, I would highly recommend just changing it to that. It'll make your approach a little bit more streamlined. That being said, too, something that I've had a lot of experience with students and colleagues alike is the idea that, you know, if someone sends an email that they don't necessarily want to send, you know, how do you get that back? How can we unsend something?
Yeah, that happens for me from time to time.
Yeah, and so unfortunately, as a disclaimer, we're not able to really control that. We are not Google.
Daniel,
Right.
something bad.
I know. I just want to throw that out there. If I could, I would, but we can't, unfortunately. So being able to go in here, actually, the undo send, you can change the time in which you can send an email and then retract it before it's actually permanently sent. I think default it might be 5 or 10. I've set mine to 30 seconds, and half a minute's a pretty good time to actually go through and say, wait, I really meant to not send that. So
I always know immediately after I send it. Like, that was a huge mistake.
Right. So let's say, like, for instance, I'll send an email to Corey just to try it out. So I'll have everything set up, I'll send it, and then right here in the bottom, it'll say message sent and then undo, and it'll just sit there for half a minute. And so being able to just retract it, it'll pull it back up, and then it'll pull you back into your drafts because it's technically listed as a draft at that point. But that is a incredibly powerful tool, and I just chose a view. But Yeah, going into that, I would say that saves
That's
a lot
a
of
nice
headaches.
feature, yeah.
So definitely recommend that. Beyond that as well, there's some other things you can change for stylistic options. I'm not going to dig into all of that because it's a lot that you can just poke around on your own. It's nothing really function changing necessarily. Another thing I would recommend though, from the general tab, would be adding a picture to your account, especially in an institution, for instance, in any kind of academic environment like ATSU. A lot of people will have the same first letter of the first name as you, right? And so having a bunch of purple capital D's with the name Daniel, it's not necessarily the most intuitive for a lot of people to find you, or if they don't know your last name. So being able to add a picture to that, you can just go in and click change picture, and if you have a file, choose the file. If it's saved in your pictures, you know, for instance, it'll pull it up. If it's in pictures, you can pull that up. Wherever your image is, you can retrieve it from there and add it, and makes it a little bit more easy for people to navigate.
I think that's especially important in a place like ATSU where we have multiple campuses and we may never meet the people face-to-face that we're working with.
Yeah,
so.
adding a face to a name is incredibly important, so I definitely agree with that. And beyond that too, adding a signature, saying, for instance, especially if you're doing anything, you know, professionally, right? You like having your contact information, your, you know, phone number, name, department, things like that. You can add a signature to that, so at the end of every email that you send, that will just be there, so you don't always have to retype it.
That's nice.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
And lastly, for the general settings that I would mention would be the vacation responder. So this is a really helpful tool for if you're ever out of the office and you want to make sure that you have good correspondence with people, to let them know that you have that transparency. Hey, I'm not here when I'm going to be back. You can set you'll just have to toggle it on or off depending. You can set a date range as well. You can change all those customizable options, but make sure at the very end of it you click Save Changes, because otherwise those won't apply. Same thing with the rest of the different tabs that you can go through, but yeah.
All right, very good. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. All right, before we go to break, we got one more little segment we're going to do. Ben, I think you're going to kind of take us through your actual Google account page, because there's so many layers to Google, and so the account page is kind of like the overall, I think, aspect of who you are. So take us through a little bit about how that works.
I will. Now you guys can see I'm in space here. I'm a world traveler, actually intergalactic traveler.
There we go.
But if you can pull up either Corey or Daniel's computer, either one of them. Yeah. So if you see here, right towards the top right-hand side where that M is, you click on that and you'll be able to see Google account. Once you click on there, you're now inside your ATSU Google account. If you have a personal Gmail account, it will look the exact same way. Two of the things that are really important here are the personal info and the security. So in personal info here, you can, one of the things you see is you can actually update your picture here in the top right hand where that M is, and you can put all your different information, your name, your birth date.
And if you update if you update your picture there, will that update where you're in your Gmail and stuff like that? Will that follow all the way down? Is that how that works?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Just like if you update it in Gmail, it will actually update here as well. So either way, it will update that picture for you. You can add contact information in there as well, and your phone number if you want people to call you, and then you're able to actually choose what others will be able to see about you. And if you click on that, just really quick here, you can scroll down a little bit, and it'll actually show you what others can see, and you can enable or disable it right there in that little X section.
All right.
And then the other thing is the security. That's probably the most important thing here. This is where you can actually see if there's any sort of security issues, and also you can set up your two-step verification. And that's really important nowadays, because with multi-factor authentication, it's going to basically do a double check to make sure you're the one actually signing in. So in this case, if you were to enable this, you would sign in with your password, and then you would set up something where it would actually send you a text message to your phone saying, hey, did you just sign in to your ATSU account? And you'd be able to click yes on your phone. So that way we keep the bad guys out.
Okay, so like I feel like every site I go to right now is asking me to do that, and I've told all of them, no, I don't want to do that, but I actually do want to do that, is what you're saying.
Correct, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that'll keep my stuff more secure. Okay, well then I will do that. All right, very good. All right, well, we're going to take a short break here. I really appreciate the expert advice we're getting so far. We're going to get some more after the break, and we're going to show you a short video on multi-factor identification. And so our authentication. And so we'll see you in just a couple minutes. All right, welcome back. We're going to start with a couple of questions that we've received so far. The first question, Daniel, is for you. If you retract a message, so if you send an email and then you say undo, can the receiver see that you've done that?
That's a good question. They actually cannot. So I would kind of describe that similarly to, say, even with like Spotify or like a other music streaming industry type tool, you can go in and add things to a queue. And I would kind of say that when you send something and if you have that 30 seconds, it's in a queue and it's waiting. And it's waiting for that time. And once that time happens, if you don't tell it to undo, it'll send.
So it's not sent, it's not out there until that 30-second passes.
Correct.
Is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Any other tips
Well,
on emails?
I actually, when he was mentioning that, I'd read a tip once about a couple things. It was about not putting in your recipients right off the bat when you do a compose. Just create the compose email, but don't put any recipients in. That way, if you don't if you're typing midway through and if you don't have a recipient in the to column, there's nobody to send the message to. And the great thing about Gmail is when you do create that compose window, he was talking about the on-hand circle or whatever, you're going to have a draft. It's going to save a draft of that email message, so you can always go in and, revise it or go through it in your mind how you want to say it, and then when you're kind of completed with it, then you can go in and add that recipient in after the fact.
Okay.
So it's kind of a great safety.
That's a good idea.
Great safety way to go with composing the emails.
Give you some time to edit and think through what you've written and really make sure this is right.
Yeah.
And you can't make that mistake until you put the people in there. Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
That's a great idea. Now, another question that we got was about explaining some of the views within Gmail and how maybe threads and subject lines can be used to keep emails separate or together. Daniel, can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I would say in regard to that kind of gets a little bit more into labels and things like that. So if you were to go, if you could show my screen actually. So let's just say you're at the inbox. You can go here, click on that gear once more, go to settings. And to really start kind of doing that filtering type thing, you can start adding different rules and saying, for instance, okay, say a subject line is, or like the sender is a certain thing, you want to send that to a certain place. You can really start digging into, okay, if this, then do this, put this somewhere else, right? And you can start really organizing. So say you have from class of whatever graduating class you have, if you want all those in a certain place, you can start really putting those in their own separate little labels. And that would allow you to really organize things so you don't have this massive inbox with literally everything that you're getting.
Right.
And that can get a little bit more complicated depending on how you want to forward things, and if you're sending something from another email account to something else. So it can be as complicated or as simple as you want it to be. But I would recommend if anyone has questions, they can definitely reach out to the service desk and we can take a look at that.
I actually use a label just as a, and Dean, maybe you could show this screen over here. I'd make a follow-up label. So if I'm going through emails and I maybe want to follow up with one now, you know, I mean, maybe later I see that and I think I need to, I create a follow-up label, tag it with a follow-up, and then, you know, you can always go over to that follow-up tag. I don't have anything in there right now in this particular account, but you can create that follow-up tag on there.
And so then you know.
And then you can go, I can go back. Those are ones I need to go back to and address later. You know, I need to go back through. You may read the email and go, that's pretty good, but I don't have time to really go in depth and reply on that right now. So I'm just going to put a label on it real quick called follow-up, you know, and then I can just always go over in this inbox area. And like I need to go check my follow-ups, and I don't have any on right now.
But any that there were follow-up would show up when you click on that. So
yeah, right.
If you have 5 or if you have 10, they're all going to be there.
Yeah, right. So like here, if I went into my inbox and I added this label as follow-up here, and I can label this one as follow-up, and then if I go over here on the left, I can click on the button. So then I've got those 2 emails kind of set aside. Cool. That's kind of a handy.
So something that always confuses me on emails is, so if we're all in the same conversation, so I've got maybe 10 emails in a conversation, but maybe 2 of them are unread and I need to kind of separate them out. Can I do that so they're not all together? Because it can confuse me on what's been read, what hasn't been read, that kind of thing, what I've acted on. Is there a view, you can where you can separate those out?
And specifically within a conversation?
Yeah. Or can you do them all?
You can mark the whole conversation as unread in the inbox. Like if you open that email and you read it and then you want to mark it as unread, you can come up here and mark it as unread, and then it'll show up bold again. So like you didn't read it.
So you can do the whole conversation.
The whole, I don't know, can you,
Ben, did you do something
part of it?
Yeah, back in the, if you go back to the settings and then go to the other settings, I hope Google fixes that. That's way too much settings. But in the general view, if you scroll down a little bit, just a smidgen, conversation view right there. So as you see right now, conversation view should be turned on for most people. And I think it's what you're talking about, where you click on the email and everybody, you'll just see the conversation. So if someone replies to that email, instead of it showing up as a new line, it just shows up as a reply in that conversation. But if you uncheck it.
Yeah, which I just did there.
Yeah, and you click save. Anything that was in a conversation now shows up as an individual email.
So it's individual email, so it takes all the nesting apart.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. See, for me, I would kind of like that because I would feel like I would get anxiety from all those ones together where something wasn't read. So I think that's a useful tool to have. All right. All right. Okay. Well, let's move on to talking more about internet browsers in general. And so when we say browsers, we're talking about Chrome or Firefox or Safari and some of those kind of options. So talk to me about what are some of the tips and tricks around use of browsers.
So I would say everyone uses anyone that uses a computer pretty much uses a browser. And I think that being said, this is one of the biggest initial pain points that'll come across. Say you're trying to access, some website with some credentials that you have, like a username and a password, and it's not working, this and that. I guess what I would like to do is really prepare people to be able to do some initial troubleshooting and say like, okay, I've tried this, tried that. And then so if they do come to the help desk, it'll allow us to better identify the problem. So as an example, I use Google Chrome. If we can pull up my screen for that. In Google Chrome, I guess there's a couple things that I would like to show, but it's really pretty run-of-the-mill, just making sure you can clean things up and make sure you're running with like a relatively fresh instance of Google Chrome to make sure that it's not anything else as like an issue for you accessing what you're trying to access. Okay. So right here, the 3 dots next to wherever you're actually signed into, once you click on that, you can scroll down to settings. And from there, this is kind of the basic troubleshooting step that I would do. Say you're trying to get into that website and you're maybe you have like a saved password or something like that. It's throwing these fits. You don't know what your password was. Maybe you're not
it won't let me in. I don't know why.
Yes, and you're just generally frustrated. Right. And if you're wanting to go and clean some stuff out in Google Chrome, you can go down. You scroll to the bottom, there'll be this Advanced tab. You can click on that. And at the bottom of Advanced, there's going to be this option called Clear Browsing Data. And so the idea being that whenever you, for instance...
So you just clicked on the clear browsing data?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes. So if you just click on that, normally it'll pull you up to the basic. We'll pull over to Advanced. But the idea is that whenever you access a website, and if you have like a username and password, your computer stores a little bit of that information to say, hey, this is who you are for this website. But sometimes if you have an old piece of data, like an old password or old username, if you change that, it could be trying to affiliate those things with your new stuff, and you're acting like you're two different people when you're not, and it'll lock you out and things like that. So it's really helpful to go in here and try to clear that out by going to the Advanced tab. Down here, the time range, I think initially it'll be like last hour, but if you go to all time, say for instance you had a password from months ago, something like that, you can make sure that these two options in particular are checked, the cookies and other site data and cached images and files, and then you can go ahead and clear data. And so in doing that, yes, it'll sign you out. Like in the upper right-hand corner, I'm just listed as a current user now, but you can sign back in, make sure everything's up to date. And again, these things are, the clearing browser data and cache can be applied to any browser as well. It's not just a Chrome thing. It can be Safari, it can be Firefox. It'll look a little bit different because it's a different browser, but there's documentation out there. If you want to say clear, cache Firefox, you can search that, look it up, find it. But this is a really good first step for anyone having issues with that. If you can't.
So that's like, I think of like, did you turn your computer on and off? Did you jiggle the cords? Have you cleared the data?
Correct.
Yeah.
Those are the three things that you guys are going to initially ask when I say I have broken my computer.
Correct, yes.
All right. Very cool. So what about like add-ons and things like that? Because I always get this thing, you should have this add-on to your Chrome browser or that add-on to your Chrome browser. Are those things you should use or shouldn't use, or?
Well, so in my experience, and I think Ben can attest to it as well, is that the majority of the time, like unless you have something very specific that you need that maybe your department is suggesting that you use for, managing workflows for either Google Sheets or Google Documents, far and few between. There's not really many that we would recommend for like a general user. And a lot of times too, if you're trying to say download a program for your department to modify some documents or whatever, sometimes in the process of trying to download it, you might click on a bad link. And a lot of times we see people that get a bunch of ads that'll say, hey, buy a condo wherever Ben's at currently or something like that.
London, right now.
London, And,
In London, good sir.
but yeah, more often than not, they're kind of issues. So I would show you how to actually go ahead and clean that out.
Yeah.
So if you could pull up my screen once more. So let's go back to this triple dot. Click on that and then go to More Tools. And then under there, you can go to Extensions and then click on that. And so here it'll show you all the extensions that are available / actually active in your Google Chrome. And so for me, I'm pretty clean. I only really have like slide sheets, docs, things like that. But a lot of times if you get those specific ads that pop up in the bottom right-hand corner in this area, at the bottom of it, it'll usually tell you that you have an extension that's telling you that. And
So when the ad pops up, it'll say it's from this extension or something? Okay.
And a lot of times it'll maybe say like Google something, 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 and that like the something will be kind of blurred out. But if you click on it, it'll usually show you where it's from. You can go in and clean it out. Highly recommend, if that happens, just go ahead, clean it out, close the browser, reopen it. If you're still having issues, of course, stop by the help desk and we can take a look at it.
Absolutely. Cool. Great. What about, so something, a term I've heard recently is private browsers, but I don't know what that is. I only think about private jets or something. I don't think they're related.
Right.
So what is a private browser?
So I guess while we're talking about browsers, yeah, private browsing is something that does come up a decent amount. If we can actually pull up my screen one more time. So for Chrome, and there's different ones for, again, Firefox, Safari, etc. But let's say we have Google Chrome in the bottom right here. If you right-click on that, you can go into this incognito window. And so when you pull that up, anytime, it even has a disclaimer here too of like the uses for those. And I think every version of that for like Firefox would also have a disclaimer for it. But the biggest plus to this is whatever you're doing for your browsing history, your cookies and site data and information for forms are just all deleted automatically. Not to say that you're, hidden by whatever internet service provider you have. They can see all of the traffic, but the biggest use for this, to put it in like a real life context, would say you're going to a public library and you're trying to, use a computer. You're trying to, I really need to get this personal thing filled out. Open up an incognito window, do all your stuff, and you can close it, and you can have the security knowing that all that information is immediately wiped out. And that's the biggest thing, because if you're signed into your regular Google Chrome window with your account, and if you forget to sign out, they have access to your Gmail because you're signed in. So this is the biggest kind of thing for public environments, and I would highly recommend, if you're in one of those, to use this if you're doing anything particularly
So you don't have
personal.
to go in and clear, if you use like the incognito or the private browsers, you don't have to go in and clear your data then at the end of the day. It just takes care of it for you. But the sites you go to still know you're going there. But,
Yes.
But the computer itself doesn't retain that information.
Yes, like Amazon knows that you went to go buy something.
Right. They know everything about it.
Right. But yes.
Yeah.
That'd be a great feature for an instructor to get in the habit of using, because if they're lecturing and maybe they're logging into their Google Drive in the classroom to pull up a presentation, they don't have to think about, well, geez, did I log in? Did I log out? If you just open the browser in incognito or private, I think is what Firefox calls it, private browsing, you don't have to worry about it. You just close the browser and all of that, passwords and everything's gone.
Can you show us one more time how to get to that?
Yeah, of course. So if you go down here, I think you can also just right-click on, no, you can't. So if you have Google Chrome down here, let me actually close out of that so I can reopen it. So you can right-click on that, and then you can go to incognito window.
So it's new window or new incognito. And you don't have to load anything. It's just always there if you have Chrome.
Yes, if you've installed Chrome, you have this. You don't have to do anything special for
You can actually open it from an open browser too. So if you open a non-secure Chrome window, you can go in and open an incognito window. You just need to make sure you close the other window.
Nice. That's cool. I didn't know that existed at all. So any other tips on browsers, things we should keep in mind with them?
Generally, just if you're having issues with speed, or if you're having issues just accessing a website, I would definitely say a lot of people have Chrome and Firefox as like their go-to. So if something doesn't work on Chrome that used to work on Chrome, maybe try going to Firefox, see if it works. Maybe that'll help both you, and if you end up coming to the help desk, it'll help us understand where that problem could be stemming from. So try different browsers and make sure you clean things out if it's feeling slow or you're not able to get into what you should be able to get into.
Cool. So one thing I've always been curious about, and Ben, maybe you can help us with this. So I know whenever I go to the help desk, they always ask, like, have you restarted the computer? Why do we need to do that? Why does that solve a lot of our issues?
Normally, when we ask anybody to restart their computer, the main reason is because sometimes there could be just a small little file that's not working properly, and restarting the computer will actually just correct that file. Other times, there could be a update that needs to happen as well, and a lot of times, a lot of people would just lock their computer for the whole weekend, and the update could be causing the issue as well.
Okay. So oftentimes it's kind of one-off things, and just restarting kind of solves that issue. It's just kind of a glitch that goes away. Is that
correct?
Kind of okay. And then the other thing you mentioned was updates, and I know when my computer starts, it says Lenovo. I don't know what Lenovo is, but I know updates are important. I know I always have a bunch of updates to do whenever I'm in a hurry. It's always like, you have 37 updates. This will take 4 hours. Sit still. Don't do anything with your computer. So I don't know. Corey, can you talk a little bit about updates and why they're useful and how they work?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things, product enhancements that the software companies are putting into the product. So there's always updates and add-ons for that. But probably more importantly is the security. I mean, you're getting a lot of great security patches. They're always finding security holes and a lot of vulnerabilities in a lot of the software. And so they'll, as they find those, they constantly are patching those security leaks. So it's just a great habit to get into. It can be frustrating because some programs change, and you run the update and you're like, wait a minute, where's that button used to be up here now,
Right.
But I mean, it's really honestly probably the better way to go because you're just going to have the safest software and frankly the most the most features, and you'll get surprised. Sometimes even Google will surprise you. And, hey, that's useful. They moved the button. I didn't need it over there. Over there's better now.
So it's kind of an upgrade. Cool.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
it's just kind of a good habit.
All right. Well, our time's kind of winding down. Any last minute tips or suggestions for our viewers out there today from any of you?
I would say, again, just to recap, with the browsers and the updates and the rebooting and all the things that everyone hates to come to us for, I would definitely say for us to be able to help in the most efficient way, being able to like provide users, with the tools to help themselves a little bit and be able to not always feel immediately frustrated. That's really kind of the goal for us at the help desk, is to be able to empower users and say, you have control as well. You're not just totally helpless. So I hope that these tools are helpful for most people on their day-to-day basis. And again, like if you go through those, let us know. If you come to the help desk, I've done this, this, and this, and it'll help us help you a little bit more quickly. So
awesome. Anything else, Ben? Any last comments for the group?
Yeah, just tagging on to what Daniel says. And even though sometimes you might say, hey, I've restarted the computer, or I've unplugged and plugged in the cord, we're still going to ask you to do it again. Not because we're jerks or because we like to laugh at you guys. It's just another thing, just to be on the safe side, because sometimes for some reason, I believe our IT guys were magical, and the next time we restart it, it works. I don't know why. I have numerous times people say, I've tried this 10 times already, and I'm like, I believe you, but I have the touch, so just give it a try.
There's a certain degree of black magic in it, I think, about turning the computer off and turning it back on again. It just sometimes fixes it.
The force is with you.
Yeah.
Yes. Corey, any last thoughts?
I mean, I just think, learning a few of these little tips, you might take a few minutes out of a day and learn some new little tip for something, and you may be surprised at just how much time that can save you in a day digging into some feature or some little aspect. We just kind of glanced over a lot of these things. And, day to day, I think a lot of people are just trying to get their work done, and and it's like, I don't have time to learn that. But, I think you owe it to yourself to at least take a little minute or two once in a while, look at some of this stuff, because you may find some workflows and things that would really shave a lot of time out of your day and add some efficiencies into your day.
All right.
So I think it's worthwhile.
All right. And so from what I heard today, one of the most important things is if I go to the help desk, I need to tell you specifically what's not working on my computer, not just it's broken, and I need to tell you what I've done to try to fix it.
Yes.
Or to make it worse. Whatever the case may be, right?
Best of your ability, yeah.
Yeah, all right. Well, I want to just thank everybody for watching today. I want to thank Daniel, Corey, and Ben for being our experts. It's been a great show with lots of great tips. We will have a recording of this available on YouTube, so please take a second to view that again if you need to re-go through something that we talked about. Also, feel free to reach out to the help desk with any questions that you have, and have a great day at ATSU.